I've been making steady progress on this IF unit. Got that rebuilt, that rebuilt, that rebuilt. All caps and resistors replaced in there. And I got down to here. Things got a little weird. Partly because of the modification for that phono input. Somebody had cut the wire going to the volume control, which initially was just a wire going from this point to one side of this pot. And also, I'm guessing this cap was bad inside, just a single 0.015. That couples the output of the pot, the wiper, into the first audio stage. They just cut this lug right off and had bypassed it. So this used to be, this was the lug going right here. They just cut it off and put in a new external cap going across like that. Well, so as I was cleaning that out, I ended up just taking this potentiometer, disconnected it from the shaft extender. I was also puzzled by the fact that there's nothing going to this. If we refer back to the parts locator, we see there's a part here, and a little part there, 3839. That is 3839 going to that tap. That's like a compensator circuit. I think it boosts the bass or something like that. Well, that was taken out completely. I mean, it looks like the lug was never even soldered to. Which makes me think this is not the original volume control. So I better double check the value on it. It doesn't look... It's Central Lab. It's not the original Philco. That's alright. It was around 2 meg, 1 meg tap, so I got to thinking, well, should I reconnect that in? And as I traced out some of the wiring, eventually led me back over to this, which is the power. And, well, originally it was a 3-position tone control, but this is a potentiometer. It's not a multi-position switch. So what's going on there? Well, I traced out the wiring, and center wiper is going over here, which is ground. And once I go over to this block, and another wire snakes around eventually over to here, just going to a 0.0016, which is this guy. And that block over there is this guy. And here is the multi-position tone control. So what it appears to me they've done is tried to make a variable tone control. Don't know how well it might work, but essentially they made this sort of, well, or maybe it's this guy. I guess it's the same resistor, 38. They made that into sort of a variable resistor, except it's going to ground, it's not going to that tap. Anyways, which leaves me with a question of, do I just kind of wire things in the way they were, or do I try to find an original control and hook this tap up with that compensation resistor and capacitor and get a multi-position tone control, which gave me a nice flashback to that Philco 37640 project, which you may recall the power tone switch on that was trashed. And I agonized over what to replace it with, because I had one with a nice long shaft. And I was torn because I know they are very hard to come by. Well, after weeks, nobody came up with one, so I ended up taking that one and I cut down the shaft and I used it in that radio. Well, lo and behold, now I'm working on another radio, and I wish I had that control, because I could use another one. If I had it, I'd pop it in here and wire everything back up the way it was originally. And so this doesn't quite feel so good. I mean, it's alright, but it's a little wobbly. It feels a little funky when it rotates. I like the position of the stepped tone control better than the variable, because with the step, I believe when you first turn it on, first click is basically with no, they call it a bass control or bass boost or something like that. Well, in the first position, I believe it's the cleanest audio going straight through. Whereas when you get a variable, every time you turn it on, you're going to be in a slightly different position. You know, fiddle with it to get to where you want it to, how you like it to sound. Whereas with the switch, generally, I just always go to the first position and I'm done, and I just leave it there. So another option too would be just disconnect this entirely, and there is no tone control at all, and it just turns on and you just get clean sound going through. Okay, I finished up with the IF unit all the way up till that volume control, which I've determined is not the original one. It measures 500K, whereas the original was 2 meg. And I can also see how they modified it. Looks like they cut the shaft down the middle, or maybe it was a split shaft to begin with, but they cut it down shorter and then drilled a hole through it so they could match it up with a hole in this extension shaft and put a cotter pin through it. Whereas the original would have been a little bit different, judging by similar Philco chassis I've worked on before. It had somewhat different locking mechanism between these two, although this works quite well. So, as far as these controls go, I've got a line, possibly, on replacements. A 2 meg with a 1 meg tap for this guy, and a switch that I hope will work out for this. 4-position tone and power, just like the original. In the meantime, I do plan on restoring this with the original wiring, and I'll until that part arrives, I'll use this guy. I also found another variation on this. One issue I have with this, I mean, for like the Tombstone models, ones that have the shorter shaft, this is perfect. Philco knobs fit on this shaft perfectly, and the length is just about right. Might need to be cut down a little bit, but it's certainly long enough. But not for the ones going to the consoles. It needs to be a little longer. So I could extend that with some plastic, I imagine. I could glue something on the end of that, or put a metal collar around an extension shaft. But the deal with this is it's be fine for the tone, but for the power, as you go between the positions, yeah, you can short the 4 contacts together, but it's momentarily going to be open as it goes between the positions. However, there is that's what they call break before make. Breaks contact when you're going from one to the other. But there is another type this company makes where it's shorting. Makes before breaks, which would be perfect for the power part of it. And I did find a source of them. But it doesn't have solder lugs. It's got like PC pins on it. But they're about $4 each. And whereas this one is 3-pole 4-position, that one is 2-pole 4-position, which is really what I want. I'm going to be wasting one of these sections. That'll make more sense when I get it wired in there. But I'm curious to see, does it really matter if when you're going through the tone positions, it's for a brief instant losing power, and I imagine it might be a little bit of a spark internally, but these are certainly rated for the amperage to handle it. Anyway, I'm moving on to the power supply side of things. I just removed the insulating sheaths from these power resistors, so you can finally get a look at these giant dog bone resistors in here that I'm replacing. So get those out of there, replace those, one more backlight block to restuff, and replace the 2 filter caps. Here's a closer look at those old dog bone power resistors. Believe it or not, these new metal oxide are more than adequate to replace them. Modern materials can take more heat in a smaller area. Now time to restuff some electrolytics. I've already cut open the ends. Just use a nice sharp carbide blade to cut open the aluminum. Pop the end caps off, cleaned out the insides. Now I want to put new terminals on the ends. The original was an aluminum shaft coming out with a piece of metal crimped on the end, a piece of steel. Just can't solder to aluminum. very easily. So put something new on there. I could use something like a piece of brass tubing. And in the past I've pried off the steel terminal and reused it, but I think what I'm going to be doing today is something a little bit easier, which is to take some solid 12 gauge copper wire and a ring terminal. So I'll get the new cap, solder positive lead to the length of this, thread it down through, and then crimp one of these on the end. And to ensure that it doesn't short out, I've put a couple layers of heat shrink tubing on this. This old rubber insulation is getting hard and chipping away. I don't want to rely on that for insulation. And for the negative, well, this can had a ground lug on the side that I'm going to reuse. Very similar to one of these. I'm going to drill a hole through the side of the can. You can see the dent there where it used to be. It's around here somewhere on my workbench. Oh, here it is. So originally this was just press fit against the side, because this does not go to the chassis. Negative on the capacitor, but does not get grounded. Let's see that on the schematic here. Negative here is actually a slightly negative voltage with regards to the ground down here. So I'll drill a small hole through the side, run a length of wire there for the negative lead, and attach that to the capacitor. It's going to get hidden inside. I'll do the same for this guy. And the third cap is actually a 2-section, and it had 3 wires coming out the bottom, which is trivial to restuff this. Just take 2 new caps and run 3 wires out the bottom. And I'll close this up with some aluminum duct tape. You see here on the side, original color coding of blue, green, and black, which I will preserve. Got some reproduction cloth covered wire. I'll use the same colors. Here's one cap done. This is the one that goes on the RF chassis. Now on this one, the negative lead on the capacitor does go to ground. So I simply took that bus wire coming out through that small hole, wrapped it around the screw on this mounting clamp, and left the stub coming out here so I can attach that somewhere underneath the chassis to make a really good secure ground connection. And as for the positive, here it is with that crimped on connector. After I crimped it on, I chipped away at the plastic and then soldered on the lug to the bus wire there. So that's where my positive connections will go. And once it's all back in the radio and the radio is working, I can take some 2-part epoxy and reattach the top. I got the rebuilt electrolytics installed, and new power resistors, and generally finished up this area, including wiring in this modern power tone switch. And wouldn't you know it, just as I get that done, this box arrives from Playthings of the Past. If I known it was going to arrive so quickly, I would have held off, because this has a replacement power tone switch that I intend to use in this radio. So it's got the nice long metal shaft. And this, it's very easy to see the switch action, so this would be the power switch. And this is the 4-position switch for tone. You'll see that otherwise these switches are perfect. I mean, the Philco knobs just fit on there so nice. A little bit of give though, because it is a plastic shaft. And it's not quite as solid as metal, but otherwise it works very nicely. And the other thing I got is replacement control for that. I think you'll see that the proper one definitely has the type of slotted shaft that will fit into this without having to use that cotter pin. And it's also the right value, 2 meg with a 1 meg tab. Here's a closer look at the volume control. You can see how it's made to fit right on the end of the shaft. Not only is it slotted, but it's got a hole down the middle. So it goes on just like so. Also notice that one of the lugs is going right to the body, and that's because it's grounded for the volume control. Shown here at the bottom of the ground. And there's that tap. So, I'm in good shape. I've got proper volume control, and I've got a switch that is the correct length and has the right operation. So I went to the trouble of wiring this, and so I'm going to give this a try because I want to evaluate how these switches work for potential future replacements. And go ahead and get this wired in, and it just leaves a little bit of work to do down here. And then of course reinstall the RF chassis. Oh, and something else I came across. I was wondering why this one pilot light was wired in directly, whereas the others were going to this little terminal here. Well, it goes up to this switch, and that is the switch for magnetic tuning. So it seems that when magnetic tuning is off, that whole ring of dial lights, 4 lights, goes off. So when you're just free tuning, there's just one lone pilot light behind the station identifier, and when you put on magnetic tuning, I guess the whole thing lights up, so I'm curious to see how that goes. Here's the new volume control mounted. I was wondering, why did they use a cotter pin with that replacement control when it had a slotted shaft just like this one? Well, I realized that the shaft is moving back and forth. It shouldn't be. There's supposed to be some snap rings around the front, which are gone. It would prevent this shaft from moving in and out. So without those, of course, somebody pulls on this and just falls right out. It's the kind of thing, I know I've seen other chassis. I parted out a 38.4 that I think had those. I probably tossed them thinking I would never ever need any. Well, now I do. I've seen a few different styles. Some kind of a piece of spring steel with kind of a slot cut in it, and then others are more conventional snap rings, which I'm pretty sure are still made. Now all I gotta do is just find one of the right diameter. So we go on the so there'd be one that goes on the inside. So it's lining up perfectly, so there'd be one that goes in there. But on the other side, seems like there should be one where this is, but they also have this. And I think I've seen some styles too where it's not just a flat piece of spring steel, it's actually curved up a bit, kind of cupped. I think that provides some tension that pushes against this to keep it snug down. So I'll do a little experimenting on that. I'm thinking now that if I just get this out and put a snap ring on either side, put some grease on it, it'll probably work alright. Or I'll dig through my junk. I tend to save every part when I scrap out a chassis. Maybe I've got some lying around somewhere. Alright, so aside from that, still a little bit of work left to do down here and reinstall the RF chassis, and hopefully in the next installment I'll try the first power up.